This could be a season for the record books.
Hurricane season is going to be wild.
All the ingredients are there.
We've got really warm ocean surface temperatures.
As a result of the La Niña phase.
That really decreases the amount of wind shear across the Atlantic basin.
And the predictions are in.
We might be tested this upcoming hurricane season.
2024 is already on track to shatter those records.
We'll revisit the impact Hurricane Idalia had last year.
Oh, no. Oh! There was a lot of debris in the air.
See how innovative technologies like AI and drones are improving forecasts.
Plane's going 210 knots and you're just ejecting this thing.
And take you off the grid and tour a unique hurricane-resistant home built on an undeveloped island.
We want to make sure that these houses last generations.
This is Superstorms, the 2024 hurricane season.
Hello, I'm Veronica Johnson, Chief Meteorologist at WJLA in Washington, D.C. Over the next half hour, we're going to get you ready for the 2024 hurricane season, and we rely on you to help us. Now, we asked people to give us their questions about the season so that we can answer them right here. So we have a lot to get to. Let's start first with the upcoming outlook for the hurricane season. It's going to be a busy one, no doubt. NOAA is expecting one of the most active hurricane seasons in history. It's forecasting between 17 and 25 named storms, 8 to 13 of them being hurricanes with 7 major, meaning a Category 3 or higher. Now, those numbers are well above the averages for the past 30 years, as well as a big change from last year. As we found out, viewers want to know why.
Curious to see how active we're talking this upcoming season.
Would want to at least know a little bit ahead of time what's happening so we can prepare and get as ready as possible.
Last year, the El Nino climate phenomenon dominated the world's weather, but this year, La Niña is expected to return. Meteorologist Jordan Evans explains the role it plays in creating bigger storms.
When we refer to the climate phenomenon, El Nino, La Nina, there's more to it than its effects on the winter here in the United States. And we also talk about that phenomenon with the Atlantic hurricane season. As we come out of El Nino from last winter, we're now likely going into La Nina for the upcoming hurricane season. So, lower than average temperatures, that's what defines La Nina. It's already being observed in the equatorial Pacific. This is live data of the sea surface temperatures. The anomalies showing the darker blues indicating cooler than average temperatures there already. And as that continues to develop, La Nina likely to be declared by the Climate Prediction Center sometime this year. And how that affects the hurricanes is a lot of factors. We're talking about weaker wind shear, and that's something that hurricanes do not want to develop. Wind shear will suppress hurricane activity, and La Nina typically decreases wind shear over the Atlantic. Trade winds are less intense, and the stability from the atmosphere is also less. So all those factors playing into a likely above average hurricane season. NOAA is saying it's a 69% chance that the water temperatures will be cooler than 0.5 degrees Celsius by late summers. That's typically close to the threshold for declaring La Nina. We're not too far off from that. La Nina, again, likely to be in place already once we get toward the peak of hurricane season. That is on September 10th of this year.
So when it comes to La Niña phase, this is when stronger than normal trade winds can actually push all the warm water in the equatorial Pacific off towards Asia and can actually allow for much cooler water to upwell off the coast of South America.
We've got really warm ocean surface temperatures, lower wind shear in the atmosphere because of La Niña in place.
Where will the hurricanes recurve into the westerlies? Will they recurve over the open Atlantic, become fish storms that bother nobody but the fish out at sea? Or could they recurve into the United States coastline? We just don't know that yet.
It's the waves and the storm surge that cause the most damage from these hurricanes, and that could go well inland, especially with more saturation in the atmosphere.
By comparison, the 2023 hurricane season was the 4th most active on record. There were 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes with 3 major hurricanes. But the enhanced wind shear caused by El Nino prevented most storms from strengthening. And Hurricane Idalia was the only one to make landfall in the United States. Idalia struck Florida's Big Bend as a Category 3 hurricane on August the 30th. Maximum sustained winds were around 125 miles per hour. Remarkably, it was the first major hurricane ever in that area. It brought a devastating storm surge of 7 to 12 feet across 2 Florida counties, the highest there since 1993 with a storm of the century. There was extensive tree and building damage from Florida to Georgia. Storm chaser Brett Adair always drives into hurricanes, but this time, as he explains, the mission was challenging.
Idalia was different because, again, it was a personal experience.
Brett Adair risked his life to get the best images and weather data from severe storms.
We're in trouble. We're in bad trouble.
I get that.
But as Idalia approached Florida's coast last year, he had to get his niece and nephew out because his sister and her husband are corrections officers and had to work.
We were really challenged with monitoring the intensity of the storm and evacuating the kids in time before the storm arrived.
And once the kids were safe, he went back into the storm.
We were preparing basically all night as the storm was coming in for a potential high-end storm, Category 4, Category 5. It weakened a little bit upon landfall to a strong Category 3, but it happened, thankfully, as the sun rose there in that part of Florida, so it wasn't completely dark. But we did see a lot of buildings get damaged. There's one good thing that occurred during Idalia. It was that it came on shore after the sun rose.
Looking ahead to the 2024 hurricane season, Brett has new tools he expects will help us all better understand these storms.
Our live dash camera in the truck to remote cameras that we're putting in the field to weather information that we're sharing with the National Weather Service offices and all of our media partners. Those are the things that we're continuing to evolve on, and we're really excited to use this hurricane season. We're hopeful that it's not as bad as predicted. Hurricane season is going to be wild.
You can expect to see several changes this year from the National Hurricane Center, all designed to help you better understand the storm's potential impacts. First, the map showing the cone of uncertainty is getting an upgrade. Starting mid-August, it will include inland watch and warning areas, even those outside of the storm's direct path. You can see them here in blue, red, and yellow. Now, this makes it easier to tell if you're in potential danger. The National Hurricane Center will also start releasing watch and warning updates more frequently than in the past, and they will introduce more products for people who speak Spanish.
Adding a Category 6 hurricane, I think we'd all be in trouble. I think we'd all have to evacuate.
Since the 1970s, we've used the Saffir-Simpson scale to grade hurricanes from Category 1 to 5. Earlier this year, 2 scientists proposed adding a Category 6. As climate change makes storms stronger, they argue we need to adjust. They propose any storm with winds of at least 192 miles per hour would be a Cat 6. 5 storms since 2013 would qualify. So what does our team of hurricane experts think?
I'm not really on board with that. That feels very much like Hollywood and the day after tomorrow. We've only had a handful of Cat 5s over the course of record keeping here for the Atlantic Basin. So I would just soon keep it the way it is.
Absolutely. We need to redo it. We understand much more about the atmosphere, how it operates since the original scale was designed in 1971.
Now, if our building codes someday and evacuation plans and other protective strategies ever improve to the point where Category 5 storms would no longer lead to a catastrophic loss, it might make sense then to introduce that Category 6. But right now, we're not at that point.
And coming up on Superstorms 2024, the direct connection between the world ever-warming oceans and more powerful hurricanes. Plus, a house built to withstand a hurricane's winds and storm surge. We take you on the rare tour of this off-the-grid home when we return.
The glaciers are smaller than they used to be, and so the ocean is rising, right?
A University of Miami meteorologist calls Atlantic Ocean temperatures where hurricanes form absolutely stunning. The world's oceans have been breaking daily heat records for more than a year. Meteorologist Marshall McPeak shows us the connection between all that warm water and what it means for stronger hurricanes.
Sea surface temperatures are critical because tropical cyclones use that warm water as fuel. Warmer water evaporates a little easier. It creates huge swaths of extra humid air, and that moist air is less dense, so it rises with less forcing. Now, that water gets high enough, it eventually becomes clouds. The water vapor cools and condenses, but that also releases heat into the core of the storm. So, put very simply, more warm water means more warm air, more moisture, and stronger storms. But why is it happening? Well, NASA, NOAA, the UN, and the European Space Agency all agree on several causes for this. First is El Niño. It is weakening right now, but we're still feeling the effects of it because it's caused a lot of warming in the last year or so. Second is the water itself. The water has a very low albedo. That means dark oceans, and that absorbs a lot of the sun's incoming heat, and it holds on to it. Third, water itself has a very high heat capacity, so it takes a lot of energy to raise or lower the temperature of the water. And fourth, there are weaker winds over Africa, and that has reduced the amount of Saharan dust. Well, that usually up in the atmosphere blocks some of the incoming solar energy, so it makes a big difference. And fifth, greenhouse gases. Nearly 90% of global warming is actually happening in the oceans. That heat is generally stored in the top 700 meters of the water. And 2023 was the warmest year ever recorded in our oceans, including in the Atlantic. And 2024 is already on track to shatter those records. And that's one of the reasons why hurricane forecasters are expecting a very busy season.
And when a storm crosses over this very warm water, it can actually intensify or maintain its intensity even up until landfall, which is something we often see within many Gulf Coast storms that rapidly intensify before landfall.
The amount of precipitation and rainfall that can be drug in with these storms far inland to cause substantial flooding conditions in inland cities such as Cincinnati or Indianapolis, as far north as Detroit or Toronto.
Despite rising hurricane frequency and intensity putting coastal homes at risk, some homeowners are embracing innovative, storm-resilient designs to protect their properties against natural, powerful forces. Meteorologist Emily Gracie got a rare tour of one such home in South Carolina.
Like many Charleston natives, Jimmy and Darlene Rawls remember Hurricane Hugo like it was yesterday.
In 1989, Darlene, my wife, and I lived on Sullivan's Island, which was right where the eye went across.
The Category 4 hurricane caused massive damage along South Carolina's coastline. The impacts were felt for months.
Not having clean water to take a shower, not having water to drink, not having power, not having air conditioning or refrigeration, that's a big deal. Just being here, watching different structures, being through, the small Category 1s that have come through, taught us a lot of lessons.
35 years later, they've applied those lessons to create a home not only built to withstand the next major hurricane, but to provide comfort in the aftermath. Cusabo Island, a short boat ride from the mainland and completely off the grid, is where Jimmy and Darlene have built their hurricane-resilient home.
It's 1.25 miles long and about 50 acres of highland. The only way you get here is by boat.
The 1,000-square-foot Deltec round home is powered by solar panels.
So all the power from the roof comes down and into the inverter, then into the batteries.
How do you get running water out here?
That's a whole different story. It's all rainwater. It's purified rainwater.
Deltec's coastal homes are all made in a warehouse in Asheville, North Carolina.
Dealing with the angles and things takes experience and patience that you don't need with a square house. But the end result is totally unique.
Unique indeed. But why round?
So it's reducing the pressure on the home, so less force is going onto the home during a high wind event. And it's also really good at distributing the load throughout the home. So there's not one area where it's like really high impact and areas for failure.
In addition to shape, they also focus on materials and connections.
Lumber that is twice as strong as your conventional construction. And our hardware that we're using is typically twice as strong as your typical tie that you would find holding a roof to a wall in a normal place. We're using a 2-leg strap that goes over the truss and nails into this high-strength lumber. So we like to overkill things a lot, and it's, you know, it's by design. We want to make sure that these houses last generations.
Jimmy and Darlene have zero regrets.
The joy that we get from it has been better than we expected.
Do you think next time there's a hurricane here in Charleston, you're gonna flee to your home out here on this island?
If it's a bad enough storm, this is a bad place to be. But I'll take my boat and I'll come back here and have a nice, hopefully, shower and refrigeration and all that while I'm cleaning up, while everybody else over there doesn't have power.
What's one of the best ways to get vital data from inside a hurricane? With a drone, of course. Find out how they are helping scientists track and better understand these storms when Superstorms 2024 returns.
Well, I find AI interesting, if not terrifying. Yet to be known about artificial intelligence and how it applies.
Artificial intelligence. It's now an everyday part of our lives. When it comes to hurricane forecasting, AI is already playing a major role, and one that could grow in the coming years. A study last year found an AI tool from Google's DeepMind outperformed humans when it came to Hurricane Lee. Not only that, but GraphCast produces its forecast in less than a minute. Instead of using complex equations like humans, it relies on massive amounts of historical data to learn weather patterns and produce forecasts. Now, Google says the ability to offer earlier and more accurate warnings of severe weather events will save lives.
But I think with machine learning and AI, that opens the door for those products to be better. And as they learn more by going through different situations in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, forecasts will be much more accurate.
The base physics of the model cannot handle what is actually happening in the atmosphere. I don't think that AI is going to be able to overcompensate for that.
With technology advancing, it is always very beneficial because the more accurate we can be with hurricane forecasting, the longer leeway we have with warning residents about what's to come, and that's going to make everyone more prepared should storms head our way.
NOAA started using drones to study hurricanes nearly 20 years ago, but after a few years, the missions stopped. Too many factors had to perfectly line up to make it work, but they found a solution: deploying from aircraft. Emily Gracie shows us how technology is improving hurricane forecasting.
You may think sending a drone into a hurricane is easy. It's not.
Plane's going 210 knots and you're just ejecting this thing. It's a lot of stress, a lot of G-forces.
After Superstorm Sandy, Congress provided more funding for hurricane research, and that, shall we say, got the drone flying.
We were able to build a few of these drones, and we tested them in Ophelia, 2014. Maria, which was 17, that's the one that really devastated Puerto Rico. And then Hurricane Michael in 2018, which turned into a Category 5 right before it made landfall.
While drones were successfully flying into hurricanes, they still were not equipped with weather sensors. So Joe and his team put out a call to small businesses to make a drone that was up to the task of being dropped out of an aircraft into a tropical cyclone and take data from inside the storm. Black Swift answered the call with a 3-pound drone called the SO.
When we deploy these in the eye, we essentially go counterclockwise. We just merge into the eye walls, keep the winds at our tail, and we just let it push. The autopilots and the AI, the artificial intelligence that's being used to guide these is pretty remarkable.
With their technology and resilience, these drones represent just one of many cutting-edge tools enhancing hurricane reconnaissance and improving forecasting for the 2024 season.
The dream would be a sail drone's in there, right? We're in the eye flying, we see the sail drone, then we look up and see the P3, and then we turn towards the eye wall, see that, and see the raging sea below you. I mean, it would go viral pretty quick.
It's always best to be prepared well ahead of a storm and have a plan in place at the beginning of the season and ready to execute. This always leads to less stress and a feeling of control if and when a storm heads your way.
Doesn't mean all the storms that form will impact the United States or the nations that make up the Caribbean here, but it only takes one storm to make a hurricane season here.
Find those reliable sources, stick with them, be prepared, and we will get through the season together just fine.
As you know by now, this could be a hurricane season for the record books. Never forget, hurricane tracks are constantly changing. So if you live or are near a projected path, you need to stay aware, stay alert, and pay close attention to the forecast, as well as your local meteorologist. I'm meteorologist Veronica Johnson, and thanks for joining us.